Everybody Loves Cookies by Neon Zangetsu, Chapter 11. Feel the Lightning. Bloody hell, those two can fight. A future discussion. Salem was nobody's fool. One did not live as long as she without learning a thing or two. Well, perhaps her curse might have something to do with that. Bah, semantics. Some might say a veil was ripe for conquest. Perhaps it was. Perhaps it wasn't. Who could say? Cinder certainly believed the former. She knew better. The sight unfolding before her was tempting, more than tempting, but she would not be undone by it. She would not be drawn in. She knew not to stick her nose where it didn't belong, not while that monster was prancing about Ozma's kingdom. Blast it! After all these years, she's begun to hope that he finally vanishes off the face of Remnant. Fate, it seems, was unkind. In less than a year, he'd already gotten his hooks into most of the population, and with what? Sweets? Ha! Not bloody likely she'd not been fooled, and so she would stay away, lest that fool infect her with his unique madness as well. Perhaps she would send Tyrion or Watts to make things difficult for him. They didn't seem the susceptible sort. Tyrion was utterly utterly devoted to her, and Arthur's ego wouldn't tolerate anyone getting the better of him. Hazel, no, she decided. Hazel she would keep close. That blasted blonde would probably sway him in an instant, and she had no desire to lose such a useful pawn. But that didn't mean she was above observing this madness from afar. No, no, no. Salem watched the brawl that followed from her hidden seer and smiled. The chaos that followed proved terribly entertaining. Cinder couldn't move, she couldn't balk, she couldn't blink. Spirits, she could barely bring herself to breathe, and even that took a conscious effort on her part. She was utterly undone by the sight before her. For all her experience and training, she never seen two maidens fight, never been so close to one. A veritable feast had been laid out before her, close enough to see and smell, but just out of range. Watching them fight was like watching the epitome of a human blender, nothing escaping their reach. The ring erupted once more. Raven roared and flung a bolt of wicked lightning forward, splitting the air with a cry of thunder. Vanessa took it on her shield and sent it arcing away to split the clouds above, then stabbed forward with her sword, all but forcing the younger woman to parry lest she lose an eye. Bronwyn batted the blade aside and retaliated with a great gust of wind, flinging her red-haired rival backwards. Vanessa dug her boots into the loamy soil, grit her teeth, and marched straight into the storm. Realizing she'd reached her regardless, Raven dropped the gall and charged back in. Cheeky bitch! They collided in a spectacular thunderclap that sent them sprawling, weapons and all. Vanessa's sword and shield plonked down beside Raven. Raven's blade landed near Vanessa. Undented by the sudden stalemate, each woman took up the other weapons and thundered forward. Somehow it made them even more vicious than before. Hack, stab, blur, parry, repeat. Not a single movement was wasted between the two of them. Raven wasn't able to get her stolen shield up in time, and reeled back as her own weapon carved a bloody trench in her shoulder. She hacked out with her borrowed short sword, and Vanessa recoiled in turn, clutching at her left side, crimson droplets dripping between her fingers. Each maiden recoiled. A peal of laughter split the air. It belonged to Raven. Here! She held out her stolen tools. I think these belong to you. Vanessa mirrored her with a smile. How kind of you. I believe you dropped this. Quick as a flash, they exchanged weapons and collided again. All the while, Cinder watched with silent awe. No mere hunters, these two. They were monsters, killers. She could see it in the way they fought. They'd shed blood long before this, which begged the question: kick her away, sweep her leg, and knock her down, ram the katana down at her skull. Which were they? Spring? Summer? Fall? Winter? She had no way of knowing. Their blades locked, and both women grinned at one another across cold steel. It was impossible to tell which maidens they might be. Magic was magic. Perhaps her master might know. Ospen certainly would, but as things stood, she found herself at a loss. She could only watch as yet more blood was shed. Vanessa cut the blade on an armored knee and drove a metal-clad boot into Raven's visage. A tooth whistled through the air. Raven grinned and bowled forward in spite of it, alarming her red-headed foe. Braving her blade with both hands, she bore down on her with a snarl. Vanessa barely got her shield up in time, and was immediately forced to a knee. For all the second it took her sword to flick out again, Raven intercepted it just under her right arm and locked the weapon against her side. Aura cracked surely as her foe struggled to retrieve her weapon. The bandit queen sneered. "Gotcha!" Her hands collided, and a fireball flashed between them to catapult Vanessa away. Cinder calculated the distance, waiting for her to sail out of the ring. As such, she saw the precious moment Vanessa's hand slammed down to her hip and ripped her second weapon free. What was that? A cord of some sort? She'd not used it yet, and surely it wouldn't make a difference. Vanessa's wrist blurred. A golden lasso sailed out and snagged Raven around the wrist, yanking her off balance. Vanessa used her as a tether and swung back, sparing herself an insignificant defeat. The lasso snapped taut and ripped Raven from her feet with an indignant squawk. Or so it would seem. She turned her uncontrolled flight into a vicious punch that sent her foe sprawling. Aura cracked viciously. Belatedly, Cinder realized she climbed to her feet. She had so had most of the crowd. Everyone was shouting, some cheering, others booing. She was swept up in it, lost in it, terrified and enraptured in equal measure, unable to do anything but stare as the duo collided again and tore into one another. There was beautiful savagery in the way they fought. Poise and grace mingled together in a mad waltz that could only be deciphered by a lunatic of deranged proportions. Cinder's tongue flitted out, licking her lips. Here lay the power Salem promised her. Here was the might that would grant her heart's desire. Here stood the strength that would make her a legend. She had but to reach out and take it. With that kind of power, she'd never be weak again. The world would bow to her, and all would grant her heart's desire. She couldn't wait to make it hers. Raven and Vanessa fought like twin demigods, one an unstoppable force, the other an immovable object. Just how powerful would she be with both their powers under her belt? Unstoppable, her mind purred the word. She would be unstoppable. Emerald shifted restlessly beside her, somewhat unnerved by the sheer glee of her mistress. Cinder scarcely noticed until the little churl actually spoke. "Ma'am, should I do something?" Her pawn eventually ventured softly, voice a whisper for her ears only. "I can trap one of them in my semblance." "What? No!" Panic reared its ugly head in Cinder's heart, and she rounded on her pawn with a hiss. "You will do nothing?" "But why?" the girl hissed back. "Isn't this what you were waiting for? We could have them." "No!" The little fool would ruin everything. Cinder seized her by the face and squeezed. "Do as you're told." Emerald grimaced but demurred. Cinder missed the subtle flash of rebellion in those red eyes as she turned away. "Yes, ma'am." In a controlled setting, Emerald's semblance would be just the thing to turn the tide in their favor, but not now, not here. There were too many witnesses here. Heaven forbid if they actually killed one another. Who knew where the power would go then? If one of them even suspected a thing, they would be on her in an instant. Cinder was many things, but she wasn't a fool. Facing two angry maidens and their benefactor? No, that way lay death had no desire to. Mercury was also gone to parts unknown, and was the better fighter of the two. Most likely he'd been killed. Another explosion rattled the wood. A raven cried out in triumph. Cinder didn't want to miss a moment of this. She couldn't bear to. The plan would have to change, of course. Emerald would understand. She wouldn't mind. No plan survived contact with the enemy, and if she had to sacrifice the girl in the future, well, her semblance was useful, but the power of the maidens only came by once in a lifetime. It forced to choose between a needy girl with balmy issues and the power of a god. She knew which she would take. Cinder wanted the power. No, she needed it. She was in love. They were out of his league. Roman had never really, well, realized it until this moment. He thought himself a capable fighter, not the best, but skilled enough. This was beyond him. Raven and Vanessa fought like twin demons. Each strike sent shockwaves racing through the stands. Every blow made the ground tremble, and they weren't slowing down. If anything, they were only getting faster as the fight wound up, and these two answered to his old man, to Naruto. What manner of monster was he that these two would listen to him, much less fight over him? Neil tugged at his sleeve. He looked down, noticed her flicking eyes. Yeah, I see 'em. Scary shit. Her head bobbed in silent agreement, and he couldn't help but notice just how pale her face was. There were few things in this world that could frighten Neil. This terrified the little minx, and Roman too. Just the sight of the death match had him fumbling for a cigar. In that moment, Roman finalized his earlier decision. His choice set itself in stone. Cinder could go get bent. He wasn't fighting those two. Damn hell of a fight, huh, Mom? A weak sigh answered. Naruto's clone exhaled in a put upon sigh of its own. Poor bastard. He'd gotten himself stuck on baggage duty. Well, not really baggage duty, more like carrying Saffron on his back. Just as well, too. Roman didn't trust the hospital he'd left her in. Kalos had already targeted her once. Who was to say he wouldn't try again? No, he'd kept his mother where he could see her. Thank you very much. Consequences be damned. If that meant making a bit of a scene, well, too bad. The doppelganger grumbled slowly behind them. For crying out loud, you're not going to let go of me, are you? Don't wanna. Sapphire yawned softly against his shoulders. Sleepy? Figures. Naruto's clone smiled. Guess we're watching this thing to the end, then. Mom was nuts. Yang disliked the idea of referring to that woman as anything other than her egg donor, but for a moment her anger slipped its leash. Raven knew how to fight. She was the specter of death, wreaking destruction wherever she went. She knew no mercy, no hesitation. She could not be said that the same could not be said of the redhead down there. Power's mom was good, really good, but her style was a different one, and an ill match against someone who had been trained in Beacon. It shouldn't have come as a surprise, but it did, and the sight genuinely alarmed her. That wasn't the semblance, it was something else, something Power's mother clearly shared. Something was afoot here, but for the life of her she just couldn't figure out what it was. What were the chances two people would have similar semblances? Not bloody likely. Her frown deepened as the match drew nearer to its inevitable conclusion. Even then, the outcome still managed to surprise her. Well, shit on a stick, Crow hissed from his seat beside her. Two maidens, Oz's gonna flip when he hears about this, huh? Ruby leaned against their uncle with a frown. Uncle Crow, what's a maiden? Nothing. Nothing at all. Adam scowled. He'd been downing an awful lot of that lately since the truth came out. But seeing this, here, now, his scowl became a grimace, one born of confusion more than fear. Secure in his discussion, his horns and signature red hair tucked up under a blue ball cap, and his brand hidden by an eye patch, he watched the slaughter and tried to make sense of it. He failed. What manner of power was this? He'd not seen the like before. One he could dismiss as a particularly powerful semblance, but two that went beyond mere coincidence. Every feeling in his bones told him to run, to turn tail and flee, to get the hell out of Dodge, but try as he might, he couldn't bring himself to move. Was this fear? He'd almost forgotten the like. He'd been so angry for so long that the feeling left him ill at ease. So much had changed in the last few days. He couldn't make heads or tails of it. He didn't want to believe or disbelieve, and that frightened him. Adam was a man of certainty, and he hadn't allowed himself to fear doubt in quite some time. Fear even less. Below him the battle came to a head at last. All right, that's enough, a voice shouted over the storm of blows. You're taking this too far. Quit it. If the combatants heard him, they gave no sign. Raven recoiled, the spitting blood, as Vanessa's shield smacked her dead in the face. The champion herself whirled away with a pain gasp as a torrent of ice raked across her cheek. This wasn't a battle, this was a brawl. His grimace deepened to watch the man who claimed to be his father wade into the ring and interrupt that brawl. Foolishness! One didn't interrupt two warriors in the midst of battle, least of all two huntresses. That was asking for it. Still, caught in the throes of their bloodlust, the warriors turned on him. Also expected, father did not falter. Rather than retreat like any sane warrior would, he advanced. Raven's blade took him low in the rib and burst out his back in a shower of blood to just over one shoulder. Nikos managed to check her charge at the last second and absorb her attack only for Naruto to grab her wrist. With single tug, he forced her blade to sheath itself in his gut. Her cry of shock was too genuine to be false. She realized what she'd done. For a terrible moment the world held its breath, and then father laughed. My turn now. Adam was looking dead at him, and even then he barely saw what transpired next. Naruto caught Raven with a vicious right hook that sent her spinning away. Simultaneously, his left swung around at an impossible angle and socked Vanessa right on the jaw. There was an almighty flash of light, followed by a terrible crack. Both shot out of the ring in unison. Raven smashed through the ground and crashed into a fence. Vanessa probed an amble warrior in her recovery, and she bounced back almost immediately and tumbled to her feet. Even from here, Adam saw the realization in her eyes, boiling with shared shame. A draw then? Well, they weren't going to like that. The crowd certainly didn't. Now to turn to face them, uncaring of the sword still stuck in his body. Carelessly, almost lazily, he ripped them free, uncaring of the gaping tears left behind. He spun in a small circle, arms raised high, cries of shock tore through the air, only to become a frightful whisper as the wound closed. No, that wasn't kind enough. They simply ceased to be. Adam saw them mend, watching fresh pink skin take the place of those grisly injuries, becoming hale and healing than once more. Some came loose deep inside of him. It felt like respect. So, father grinned cheerily. Did anyone bet on a draw? Come on now, let's see a show of hands. He didn't pay attention to what followed. His world was too busy crumbling. Those had been fatal words. The blonde had quite literally walked them off. To hell with that. Even a huntsman wasn't capable of regeneration to that extent. Wounds took time to heal. They didn't vanish like magic. It just wasn't done. At that very moment, he caught sight of Cinder lurking in the stands. She wanted to fight that. More fool she. The White Fang would be slaughtered to a man if they dared stand against. He choked on the word. If this man truly was his father, they would be slaughtered to a man. He wasn't having it. Adam grabbed a nearby napkin, pulled the pen from his pouch, and penned a quick note. Then he stalked forward. Cinder bristled as someone bumped into her. Here, a rough, vaguely familiar voice rose in her ears. Consider this my resignation. From hands pressed something into her hands. She frowned at it and looked down for but a moment. Amber eyes fluttered in a rapid blink, not quite comprehending what she'd been given. A napkin? Why would someone give her such a thing? When she dared to look up, she found only a million bodies, not so much as a hint of whoever had given her the item. Vaguely unsettled, she turned back to the parcel in her hand. Warily she unfolded it. Within lay but 3 lines of dialogue. She glared golden daggers at the letter. Dearest Cinderfall, I fucking quit. Taurus. The letter turned to ash in her grasp. Adam. You go on ahead, sis. I'll be a bit. Yang dug in her heels as the crowd began to disperse. More than a few grumbled about it. One or two lucky sobs had come away with hefty winnings, but their glee was muted in the fury of their fellows. More than a few had lost quite a bit of lien today. Huh, poor bastards. This was precisely why she didn't gamble. Give her a strawberry sunrise any day. With the bout over, and wasn't that a bit of a buzzkill? She found herself lingering behind the stands. Uncle Crow had all but stormed down the stands and gone after Raven, leaving them to their own devices. Weiss had muttered something about seeing her sister down there. Ice Queen had a sister, and Blake had gone and pulled another of her disappearing actions. just as well. She didn't want them to see her like this. Ruby was fussing over her enough for all of them. Her siblings dithered, bless her simple soul. Are you sure? Yang forced a smile she didn't feel. No, she wasn't, not at all. She didn't relish the idea of talking with Raven or Naruto alone, but this was something she needed to do. Alone, she couldn't keep hiding behind her team like some frightened fowl. She wouldn't have a better chance than this if she kept putting it off. She'd wind up hiding forever. Yang Xiaolong didn't hide. Yeah, don't worry about it. She gave her a nudge. Save me a plate of cookies, yeah? Silver Eyes danced with glee. K. Ruby didn't need to be told twice. She all but vanished in a whirl of red rose petals. Yang watched her go and felt her confidence shrink with each step, and she felt small, tiny, exposed. Her left hand reached across her right, gripping her wrist until it creaked. She took a slow breath and exhaled, marshalling up the last gathering dreads of her confidence. She could do this. She was strong. She was mighty. She was. Someone bumped into her. Her confidence cracked. Nope, nope, nope. Pardon me, a voice murmured. I didn't see you there. Hey, don't worry about it. She paused, just now noticing her unsuspected guest. Tall, fair of face, with dark hair and striking golden eyes. Give her a pair of cat ears, and she could be Blake's sister. Well, if you ignored the red dress, Blake liked her blacks and white. And this woman looked like she'd stepped right out of a runway. A faint spark of jealousy burned in her heart before she managed to squash it. Cinder, right? She fumbled for her name. You're one of the transfer students from Mistral, yeah? I am. Yang winced at her deadpan. So, heck of a fight, yeah? Bronwyn was impressive, the older girl conceded with a scowl, as was her opponent. Hmm? Yang pushed away her anger, offered a non-comical grunt. Mom's a bitch, but she knows how to swing that sword of hers. Cinder went curiously still. Golden eyes flicked up and down the length of her, just now noticing the similarities between the two of them. Yang didn't much like that look. It was much too sharp, too focused, too intent. A flicker of something passed through Fall's gaze, gone before she could think to comment on it. Her posture relaxed just a little. Somehow that put Yang even more on edge. I wasn't aware Raven Bronwyn was your mother, Yang scoffed. Egg donor more like. But you are her daughter. Yang blinked. Yeah. Cinder smiled at her. Excellent. Yang's world went blank. Previews. Uh, Blake eyed at the offered hand like a poisoned wasp. What do you want, Adam? I am offering you a truce. Sapphire frowned at Nora. You look familiar. The Grenadier wrinkled her nose and looked up at her. So do you. Roman swore. No, 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 no. This is not happening. Tell me this ain't happening. Neil clapped gleefully. We need to talk. Naruto spun the chair out and sat down in it, arms braced against the back. His companion mirrored him well, almost a little too well. Yeah, we've been putting this off for a while, haven't we, Tai? His grin became a grimace. Or should I say, don't? A tan limb rose. Please don't say it. Meet me at this location. Come alone, or the girl dies. Naruto swore. Oh shit. Ray, just calm down. Raven inhaled, exhaled, slowly. People keep asking if I'm back. She spoke softly, the words a low controlled in the ensuing silence, and I haven't really had an answer. I wanted to leave my old life behind, be something better, you know. She stood slowly, sending the chair spinning behind her. I was tired of fighting a pointless battle in a pointless war. A hand flew to Omen's hilt, thumbing it free from its sheath. I wanted to prove something to myself, prove that I could be better, but now her gaze rose, eyes gone to sinister scarlet, like slits burning with wrathful flames. I'm thinking I'm back, the scroll cracked ominously in her grasp. And now listen here, you little shit. Get your filthy mitts off my kid and give her back, or so help me. Raven eyes burned with unholy scarlet flames. You will die screaming. End of chapter 11.